Okay,
Brilliant.
So now we will begin. All right, beginning with Elizabeth Marston and Alvamila Garcia. I'll let you present the title of your presentation.
Okay, great, thank you. So our presentation is entitled AITA Pets, Jokingly Judging Pets on Twitter to Boost Morale as a Reaction to the COVID Pandemic. So this acronym that we've used here and on our first page, this AITA, this comes from the subreddit r/am-I-the-asshole, which is a subreddit where people go to write a story which is in some way morally ambiguous and in which they feel they may have been in the right or in the wrong. And they ask the followers for their honest judgment. So originally, AITA has come from Reddit, but we are in fact looking at the Twitter repost community, which follows the account at AITA_online. And importantly, this isn't a bot account or an automated account in some way. This is a real human who selects by themselves, or thanks to suggestions from community members, which posts on Reddit they should reshare to Twitter for the Twitter followers. And the Twitter followers then participate in this same kind of judging activity that the ones in Reddit also engage in. So to come to the specific thread that we're looking at, on the left of the slide here, we have a standard Reddit repost, which includes the title of the post. In this case, am I the asshole for ruining Christmas and New Year's Eve because I was removed from my mum and dad's wills? And then the link will always take the followers back to the original Reddit post, but the screenshots will include the entirety of the kind of top level post, but not the comments from the Reddit followers. Now, during the COVID pandemic, in the kind of first COVID-19 lockdown, this Reposter account on Twitter created the post on the right as a distraction from world events and as a fun activity for their followers to engage in. And here they don't overtly mention the pandemic, and this is likely to enhance the framing of it as a distraction activity. So they set up a formula that we should use this, am I the asshole for, and then put a post that's in this kind of perspective of our pets. They set up a hashtag, this AITA Pets, and they also ask people to post photos. So the reposter is also writing, of course, in the first person, which is mirrored. On the left, you can see these are all written in the first person. They all use a kind of I narrative. And here we've said, am I the asshole for stealing the bath mat while my owner was in the shower? So it's from the pet's perspective, animating the voice of their pet. And this can be recognized as a kind of parody, since parody involves taking on the voices or perspectives of others. So the AITA Pets thread worked quite differently from a standard Reddit repost. The AITA online post that we saw on the left of the previous slide is like the object of scrutiny and discussion, and then all the comments come below it. And this is a case of like a recontextualization, because the post comes from Reddit, but then it's recontextualized onto Twitter. And it looks like this standard Reddit post we've got on the left, this kind of visual explanation. However, on the AITA Pets thread, what we have is AITA Online initiating the activity, and then loads of people creating these little tiny small scale AITA posts. And these aren't an example of recontextualization because they're unique AITA posts that are created specifically for Twitter. So these many small AITA posts themselves become the object of discussion. And then we have this great discussion thread below. And this is a kind of complicated slide, but I'm just going to draw your attention to the AITA Pets, because we actually have a large corpus of data. So we've collected a full data set, which was the top 10 posts by AITA Online at the time at which we did our data collection. This isn't actually the case now. Some of these have kind of altered there have been more popular posts since. And this was determined by the metrics that are the top of these column headings, so likes, retweets, tweets in the conversation. And you can see here that the number of likes and the number of retweets for the AITA pets thread are sort of comparatively low. That's why they're in this orange and red color here. But the number of tweets in the entire conversation thread is pretty high because a lot of people participated in this play activity. And notably, we've got a lot more interaction between commenters than we usually see. And this is reflected in the number of replies to the initiating tweet, which gained 100 or more likes, which is 69 here, and the replies that themselves had 10 or more replies below them, so a kind of nest of tweets. And we have 31 of these. So we can infer that in AITA pets, there's a lot more inter-community interaction than we normally see.
So if we are looking at pets, and we're looking at this, as Liz said, this destruction that the AITA account has suggested for all the followers, there's obviously a humoristic goal in mind. And in this case, it has been proven by many studies that have came out since the COVID lockdown situation started, that humor worked really well to help people feel better and maybe to uplift spirits during a time that was very hard on everyone. So again, humor is a collective defense mechanism that builds solidarity and provides relief. And basically, we have seen this in many studies, for example, on COVID memes, which focus particularly on making light of the situation that people are going through in this search for a positive emotion, a desire for cohesion, a desire for closeness. But as we can see here, and as we will see in the analysis, there are not many mentions to the pandemic in this case. So that's why the use of humor, we think, in this AITA pets thread is a bit different from other cases of humor that has arisen during the COVID-19 pandemic. Moreover, when we are interpreting humorous text, we know that there's an important function of intertextuality when it comes to people understanding the humor that is created, because it divides all the participants into in-group and out-group members. And in this case, as Liz has shown, the AITA post, Amaidia's call for stealing the bath mat, if you are not a member of this community that is used to seeing these Reddit posts and judging people on their acts, maybe you are not used to how they are phrased, or you don't know how to interact with them. So obviously that sets like a starting point from where everyone moves. And finally, we believe that this humor that was created through this parody is another example of how you can establish an affinity space through ambient affiliation, of course, because these are people from all over the world, but shared humor would just contribute to enhance it even more. Moreover, if we're looking at pets, can you change the slide, Liz? Thank you. We are looking at what is called cute culture, which has exploded in social media since many years now. Pet images are part of this cute economy of the internet, and they are basically driven by the cute aesthetic, which inspires feelings of care and empathy, as you can see on the slides. And now, for many years, it has been digitalized, and that means that what we understand as cute has expanded even more, and just sharing and looking at cute pictures online has this effective transaction and has become even a subcultural discourse. One of the researchers that has looked at specifically pet Instagram accounts finds that the people who share these images or who manage these accounts believe that images of pets can express joy, where joy may not often be found, which would be particularly indicate for the case that we are dealing here. And that pet Instagram accounts are a pure content on the internet, as opposed to the toxicity and performativity of social media in general. And this is especially relevant in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic.
So onto our methodology. Because Alba and I are doing multiple papers and analyses using the AITA Twitter community, we actually gathered 10 full AITA threads, of which AITA Pets is just one of those. And we used the Tweet Downloader, which is an application created by the Twitter dev team using the Twitter API. and you can apply for academic use of this tool. And having gathered the data, we cleaned it and uploaded each conversation to Sketch Engine, which is a corpus management tool and also a corpus analysis tool, which created a corpus of around 700,000 words with 10 subcorpora, so one subcorpus for each thread. And AITA pets is around 83,000 words. And we've done a lot of our analysis in Sketch Engine as well, and you'll see various screenshots from Sketch Engine in the following slides. And just to quickly explain a bit more about AITA Online, the reposter. So as a user, as I mentioned earlier, they typically select the funniest or the most interesting posts from Reddit and then share them on with the Twitter followers. And they rarely participate in the discussion themselves, and they act rather as a curator. And they also act as a kind of responsible parent or protector of the community, because the other thing they do is they will put a kind of trigger warning or a content warning where a thread might be distressing to their followers, because some of these AITA posts can get quite serious and involve situations of like abuse or other kind of nasty things that might upset people. However, in this AITA Pets thread, they take this different role. They've initiated the activity, but they also take a more active part in commenting and retweeting their followers' posts. And you can see some of their comments on the thread here on the left-hand side of the slide. So this word cloud was created from the AITA Pets subcorpus, but with usernames, URLs, and stop words removed. So it just shows the highest frequency words that were left after that cleanup was done. And if you just have a quick look at these words, you can get an impression of how these posts look. And there are unsurprisingly a large number of kind of AITA-related judgment terms. That's these things like NTA, which stands for not the asshole. There's the AITA Pets tag here. But also you can see a lot of items that are kind of associated with pets, not just names of specific animals like cat here, but also things like food, a bed, there's toys, eating, these kind of things. So that gives you just a really broad overview of the sort of data we're talking about. And now I'm going to pass over again to Alba, who will go through the data in a bit more detail.
So if we start by looking at the situations that are asked for judgment in this thread, which is very interesting, we've got different examples. We have selected 5 of them here just so that you can see all the different options when it comes to the animals. For example, you can see there's a rabbit, dog, fancy rat, snake. So we're not only talking about cats and dogs, which are maybe the most typical pets, but a whole variety of animals. We've got the hashtag that some of the Twitter followers used, hashtag AITA Pets, but also new hashtags, in this case, hashtag cute though, which already points in the direction of the judgment that will come for these pets. And as you can see here, all of them have pictures, and there's even one video. And most of the videos are presented as proof of this, let's say, misbehavior by the pets. But as you can see, I might be asshole for my morning routine of speed hopping around the bed. I might be asshole for waiting till I'm inside to poo. So things that animals usually do. And it's very interesting to see in the second example that you can see a 3MO, 3 months female, which describes the age and the sex of the animal, which is something that's very typical from standard AITA posts, where OP, the original poster, actually states their age and the age of sex of any other person involved in the situation. It's very interesting to see as well, because these are humans trying to be their pets or impersonating their pets, that there's some vocabulary that comes up a lot. And as you can see on the left, we've got my owner, we've got my human with a lot of occurrences, but we've also got my human, or you can see good boy at the bottom, and then good boy misspelled, which are the examples of what is called lol speak, or Dogolingo, which is this idea of how animals would speak and write if they could speak and write, which is by manipulating usually phonetic aspects of the words. So you can see here how animals view their humans as humans, dads, moms, roommates. And as you can see on the right as well, there's even roommates. And this is a Thesaurus, which is a very interesting tool that a Sketch Engine provides, where you select one word and it gives you synonyms, antonyms, and similar words. As you can see with human at the center, we've got mom and owner very close, which gives us an idea of, let's see, the divide between men and women in this thread, but we've also got cat, dog, and then person, brother, etc. If we look now at the single word and multi-word terms, in this case, we used the reference corpus provided by Sketch Engine, which is N1010-2020, which has more than 26 billion words, because we wanted to see what words are unusual or are just particular for our subcorpus of AITA pets. And as you can see, we've got AITA, NTA, YTA, asshole, AUTA, I don't know how to pronounce this, na and ta, which are basically the terms which are typical from AITA threads. Am I the asshole? Not the asshole. You are the asshole. Asshole alone. Are we the assholes? And no assholes here or the asshole. It is important to note that for na, we cannot be sure that they are all no assholes here, because it's also the na, kind of like a form of the no. And we can also see, Liz, if you can click once, we can also see in yellow all these words that are related to, let's say, animals and animal functions. We've got poop, pee, puke, but we've also got meow. We've also got human again, as you can see, which of course is highlighted by Sketch Engine as opposed to human, which I guess is a fairly common word in the reference corpus. And you can also see here we've got OMG, LMAO, which are typical acronyms from the internet, which we are all familiar with. If we look now at the multi-word terms, they are also very interesting, because as you can see, most of them are related to animal function and animal objects and accessories. We've got litter box, food bowl, wet food, dog bed, clean laundry, which animals love, chew toy, etc. And we've also got, very interestingly, toilet paper and conference call, which are words that were especially salient during, toilet paper specifically at the beginning of the pandemic, but conference call is something that we have all gotten very, very used to. And finally, we've got stealing mom, which is very interesting because it's missing the genitive. No, that's all right, Liz. That's all right. Don't worry. Don't worry. I love commenting on this. I didn't want to pass on the opportunity. If you can move to the next slide. And then we wanted to look specifically at what it is that these animals are asking judgment for. So what it is that they are doing. In theory, they could be doing wrong. So you've got AITA for stealing, trying, refusing, insisting, and wanting, which we believe that are kind of voluntary actions that we could usually associate with humans. And then in yellow, you've got normal actions for pets, like sitting, waking, peeing, taking, chewing, jumping, screaming. So they are just common actions which you couldn't really judge them for. And finally, if we look at the replies, they are very interesting, because as you can see, the overwhelming majority of judgments deem the animals or pets not the assholes, obviously, in most cases because they are too cute. And they are cute for doing what they do because they are animals, but they are also cute because the pictures that Twitter users add to the judgments, let's say, they are either very cute or very funny. But as you can see, almost an 82% of these AITA judgments are deemed not the asshole, it's very funny because there's an agreement which kind of replies and mimics the agreement that we generally find in standard AITA threads, where the whole community is judging a single action by one specific original poster. But in this case, of course, pets cannot be the assholes. And it's very interesting to see how people in the replies keep up with the charade and this pretense that they are actually addressing the animals that asked for judgment, which you can see here with all the you pronouns. You were clearly durability testing, you're very high standards, you're being an absolute gremlin, but your owner needs to take better care of your headphones. And very interestingly as well, we can see some terms associated with memes like purr baby, or if you sit, or which reflects the meme, if I fit, I sit, which is very popular on the internet.
Okay, I'm going to bosh through these as fast as I can because I see the time is now at 20 minutes. We're going to go just a tiny bit over. So there were just a very few negative reactions to the idea. And this, I'm not going to go through this whole conversation, sadly. There are some really interesting things that go on here where basically this person kind of says, if we're doing AITA for animals, I'm out, and AITA online comments, your loss. But then in these comment threads, it kind of transpires that this number one person is having a really bad time and a really tough time with the pandemic. And although they do receive some insulting and aggressive comments from the others, eventually in both of the threads that kind of splinter off from this initial comment, there's some really good, honest self-disclosure that happens about the personal effects of the pandemic. And though it's clear that this humorous play activity is kind of useful and cathartic for some people, for others it might just seem inappropriate or even a bit kind of disrespectful. And I think people kind of get to that realization through this thread. So in conclusion, we've got an interesting case here which stands apart from a lot of the writing that's been done on people's behavior during the pandemic, much of which was about things like political humor, social justice, inequality, and also about how people online addressed those things through the medium of humor. However, our data, rather than foregrounding the pandemic, ignores the ongoing pandemic as much as possible and engages in play just for the sake of play to lift everyone's spirits. And people engage with it in the same spirit in which it was initially framed, i.e. as a distraction. So in other AITA posts where people engage in judgment, they're doing so to accomplish a certain kind of self-construction and to express a particular understanding of the moral order. But on this AITA pets thread, because there was this really clear kind of blueprint right from the beginning, which the AITA online account created, even quite casual followers of the account were able to participate in the play activity. And it was no longer about moral judging and showing a particular understanding of that, but just about creating humorous content and engaging in kind of a pleasant ambient affiliation through liking and retweeting and participating in various polls that were added to the post. So thanks for watching, and we welcome your questions.
Sorry for the delay. We were turning on the microphone. Thank you very much. Very interesting. All right, we'll open the floor for questions and comments. First in the physical audience from the room. Yes. Okay, let us know if you can, I think that she can hear you from there. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
It's slightly distorted, but it's okay.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's very interesting stuff. I wasn't aware of this AITA pets threads. Very interesting. I was wondering, first of all, as just a kind of small technical question, why you chose 1010 as a reference purpose, and whether you maybe, or maybe as an idea, collecting a similar data set as a reference purpose, because some of the features that you find, I would argue, is probably because 1010 largely consists just of web pages, and web pages I would assume are radically different from your Twitter set. So have you thought about that? I think it probably wouldn't be too hard to sketch it, right?
We compared it to a whole bunch of corpora, but N1010 seemed to reveal more interesting features. Luckily, there are a few end-to-end corpora. There's like different ones from different years. So also that was helpful because the end-to-end 2020 obviously included a lot of pandemic-related terms, which the end-to-end 2018 didn't. So we did use them together to also work out what was pandemic-related within our data and what wasn't. And then we also cross-compared our AITA pets with the other AITA threads, just to see what was unusual about that one, and like specifically compared to the other normal posts.
If I may,
But you're right, like other corpora as well would of course reveal other keywords.
yes, and if I may, we I think there's a lot of echo now. We do consider, and we wanted to compare it with a Twitter corpus, which would be also really interesting, and we will do so. We just didn't have enough time to create it. If there is one available, do let us know, but we do plan on comparing it with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think that it's important to point these things out. I think that sounded very interesting. That just comparing it to different reference corpora will give you a very different sense of aboutness, and as you just explained, so that's very interesting.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And everyone in the chat is also appreciating the talk. Fascinating stuff so far. All right, thank you again.